The first poem I'm going to read is called The Woman. I had a pretty good gig in Portugal last year for a month or so, and there was a Dutch thriller writer living nearby named Jan Peter. He's a fun guy. Mostly he wanted me to teach him American idioms. And his favorite of those was, your ass is grass. And I'm not sure he ever really understood the subtleties of the expression. But when I was sitting out on the patio trying to decide what the next move was in evenings, Jan would pull out on his scooter and he'd go, "Your ass is grass, man." And he seemed to really make him happy, so that was good. So a few months later, I got an email from him, and he was just finishing his new thriller. And this is the epigraph of this poem called The Woman, and it's verbatim from Jan's email. "I'd be very honored if you would compose a poem as part of the manuscript of my book about the search of a man for his apparently disappeared girlfriend. The girlfriend, so it seems, only exists in his distorted mind. So it seems." So I wrote this poem for Jan. "We never believed a word in the beginning. The night she rode, smoothed silk across her thighs, and walked silently, purposely, he had stressed, into the narrow woods, apparently out of this world forever. Other times an airport was involved, a seashore, a hushed language, one he had spoken in childhood but forgotten. Once, an abduction. No price was ever demanded, no condition met. We'd never seen her, any of us, except through the film flickering behind his eyes. Mise-en-scène of bottle and two glasses, ashtray, spent cigarette, stained, stone-hearted red. Drowsy fan overhead confessing nothing but dust. And though we wearied of him, banished his banalities and his phantoms, we couldn't stop the telephone from tolling. 4:03 a.m., he was certain he'd seen her at a club, dipping into a limousine. 5:21, the trail lost in shadow. 7:18, maybe it wasn't her. He can't think anymore, but Christ, that dress, that hair, the curve of shoulder, it could have been her twin. Then one morning, the call we'd expected, flat voice describing altercation, violence, his arrest. It was over. Even then, we didn't believe a word, and when he asked for us, pretended not to hear. We had our own ghost to interrogate, our own story. His pitiful private journey, a delusion complete. Until the night the doorbell rang, with an urgency, a strangeness, a threat we couldn't name then. Too late for a visitor. What was ever as it seemed. And that for us was the end of the beginning. Jan loved the poem, and it's going to be in his new Dutch thriller, in Dutch, apparently. I'm sure it'll fit right in. I've been playing with several different series lately, and one is we just recalibrated our general ed courses at MTSU. So I was teaching the Intro to Lit for the first time and reading the Bedford for the first time in years. And for some reason, I started coming back to these texts and stepping back into the stream and writing poems about the texts, sort of retelling them, correcting them, whatever the case may be. And so this is the William Carlos Williams poem. And for Williams geeks, the fun is you see how many poems you can notice in the poem. There are 5 or 6 or so. The only other insider gag is, if you remember, what's that poem called? To a Poor Old Woman. He repeats the line, she likes the taste of them, about 5 or 6 times in the poem. Okay? This is called The Plums in the Icebox. I wrote a whole bunch of these. They're fun to do. I'd encourage you to rip off the masters also. Okay. Simply stated, you like to watch. A young woman stepping beyond the walls of her husband's wooden protection, shy outline of breast, of hips. As you pass through leaves, red-faced and red-handed, other men approach with offers of fish, of ice. It's no crime. You accelerate and bow. On the square, a sad sack of a poor old woman munches a plum that transforms you both. She likes the taste. You could say that again. And this ripe ruby in her hand, the goodness she sucks out. But those in the icebox that you knew perfectly well your wife saved for breakfast, the ones she loves, sure you took them. She likes you more, and your note, all charm and cheek, is an apology you can get away with. Even now you raise purple sphere to lips, its sweaty cool, explode sweet skin between your teeth in messy tribute to women, young or old. With your free hand you navigate with delicate precision for the hospital into oozing snapshots of spring, this contagious country you adore. But wasn't it fall just moments ago? No matter. There aren't enough seasons, enough mornings to focus through rimless glasses. Yes, everything depends. And as for that wheelbarrow just passed, still shiny with rain, those silly white chickens, for God's sake, refrain for once from your labored meanings. Let this last plum be enough. The best part of this book, Exit Pursued by a Bear, is that it has a succession of epigraphs from Orson Welles movies. Actually, have you ever seen The Lady from Shanghai? Fantastic movie, kind of fell out of Welles' back pocket. Let me read you some Orson Welles. To hell with the poems. Let's read this. It's from The Lady from Shanghai. And he's got this really tacky Irish accent through the whole thing. Remember that? It's fantastic. This is from the opening monologue. He was already breaking up with Rita Hayworth, but they had one more movie in. That's how I found her. And from that moment on, I did not use my head very much except to be thinking of her. But in the park in those days, the rough young fellas used to be staging holdups and the like. However, these young fellas were not professionals. And that may be the reason I start out in this story a little bit like a hero, which I most certainly am not. I'll just read one poem from this book. Let's do a domestic poem. I noticed that the bug guy was coming over to the house more often than I thought absolutely necessary and hanging out with my wife a lot in the kitchen, drinking my shade-grown, hand-roasted coffee while I was back in the back pretending to write poems. Mostly just read magazines, right? And so I was curious about what was going on, so I wrote this little poem. It's called Terminex. I shuffle along the wall of my nest, sniff at the door. Muted conversation out there in the big outside, maybe laughter. The bug man has the hots for my wife. She a cold eye for me. Neither would cry if I were found on my wings, abdomen still, thorax shut, every leg stiff in the air. I dash for the kitchen. There are Bugsy and wifey drinking coffee. I hear him declaim his longing for the Bordeaux region. He sees me and his thin mustache twitches at something repellent. How blinding the room. The woman frowns, disgusted. I've learned to keep my palpus shut, scurry back to a world quiet and small. But when the fist on the door comes, what can any creature do? Fate erect on two legs, cropped hair, white shirt, silver keg of poison. I wave an antenna and tell him to help himself. I'm spineless, but hard to kill. Okay. Here's my new book. But I will called Let Me Explain. It's a series of apologias, or sort of explanations. But I warn you, if you go on Amazon to buy multiple copies for the holidays to give your loved ones, be careful, because there's another book called Let Me Explain, which I was aware of. It's a children's book. It's Let Me Explain, a story about donor insemination. And here's the card catalog. A little girl explains how she was conceived through artificial insemination, and although she has genes from her mother and a donor, her daddy is her only father. Yep. Better read one serious one here. The Apologias attracted me. They sort of caught me off guard, but they end up offering a nice range of possibilities I could work in with a lot of different subjects, serious stuff, silly stuff, whatever the case may be. This is called, it's a little short thing, it's called Apologia from My Father the Killer. He's young, lean, knotted, immortal as I see him. Hear the sad business. One boot on each rail of the shaft, and as the flushed cow ran blind beneath to bring the sledge down hard between wide ears. But when that ridge of bone refused, it took a second blow, or third as the beast screamed. Hit the bitch. And as he stood down trembling, you'll get used to it, to which my father replied, no, I won't. Okay, back to business. I'm from Kentucky, big horse racing fan. And I don't know if you remember the plight of, I know we're all still reeling from the horrible Barbaro situation, but I don't know if you remember War Emblem. He was sold to the Yoshido Japanese clan for quite a bit of money and then refused to stud. Does this ring a bell? Well, it rung a bell for me, and I was looking at a picture of War Emblem in the paper, and it seemed like he was looking right at me. So I wrote this poem. It's called Apologia to War Emblem, quote, dud as a stud. And the epigraph is from an article I read. It says, Osuki Takataki, spokesperson for the Mishita family, which purchased War Emblem last September for $17 million. Quote, clearly, this is not a good situation. You're causing frowns in Hokkaido, twitchy palms at Lloyd's of London, libido lost. War Emblem, Equine Brother, I am for you. 200 brood mares booked this year alone, $70,000 lost for every covering you refuse. At East Chestnut, haunch, twitch of sleek tail, you look away, pretend not to see the rut you're in. Bird watching, worried pros call it. It happens. Small consolation to the Yoshida clan, so tough. I peer into your dark eyes, luminous and lonely, and I think I know precisely how you feel. Still a young stallion at 4, but your time on the hard track of a fast run, sun high, money down, that's all behind you now. Which is fine too, for peace, stillness, tender grass of home, but not a sweaty, quivering parade of flank, penetration on demand, nature's good lust commodified for yin. Seems a lifetime past. 2 minutes of destiny, a bugle blast, that blanket of roses smelling for one instant, like heaven caressing the genius of your legs. The first review that's come out of this book is called The Author Vulnerable. And that shook me. So I spent the summer on a new series about dead metaphors. Started by being out in the yard at sunset, seeing a really beautiful spiderweb backlit, and thinking, boy, it's too bad you can't write a poem about a spiderweb because there's absolutely nothing else to say about it. So the next thing you do, of course, if you have any sense, is go in and write a poem about the fact that you can't write any poems about spiderwebs. And that was dead metaphor number 1, spiderweb. So I wrote 20 or 30 of these pretty quickly. Some of them are about primarily poetic conceits, and some are more, it branched just into sort of just ways you sort of play the role of your life and feel about things that happen to you. And I'll finish up with a couple of these, just to give you a sense of them. See how vulnerable they sound. It's called this is dead metaphor number 3, the rose. How the room centers around a vase centered on a table, narcotic loosening of petals. My God, how quickly today passes. Beginning containing unfolded finish, first beauty the solution to our pain. Whether wild thorn of the woodside or tended garden monarch, still dangerous in her refinements, cut in the budding. One petal, then another silken flag proffered kerchief, dropped from soft knot, lifted by hand and discarded upon a dappled stream of the mind, spun and parted. Finis. For if that, fated lover, is the sort of nonsense you incline to, please allow this simple test. Lower your blushed face into what remains of the flower's invitation. Press nose and lips to fragrant death. Inhale. By any symbol, it smells as sweet. I'll read two more of these if that's all right with you. Then we'll be done. I noticed that lots of poets, even our top-ranked poets, can't help writing about teaching their children to ride the bicycle. And you can't lose because if you don't have any kids, you can write a poem about learning to ride the bicycle. So we're all in it. So this is dead metaphor number 7, learning the bicycle. And all these share that cynical dismissiveness that I'm so fond of, and it's a whole new thing we're into. Cracked knees and elbows, bloodied chins don't make an archetype. There goes little Sally, trainer's off. She's, going down. Oh. Well, ho-hum. Tears and recriminations, a question of damaged trust. Next day typically comes next. Hard lessons again, Sally or Joey faring better, wobble here, wobble there. Maybe a tree leapt in the way, but you will them up, will them safe, and voila, no casualties. Tedious victory indulges tedious conceit. To lead by following. Or perhaps you merely gape into the circumstance of empty arms. Joey's erect by himself now. Sally's pumping for a whole street of watchful boys. Or even worse, it's young you on the banana seat, clutching handlebars like a hellraiser, risen high and weaving straight, so to speak, into the future. Dad's crouched back there somewhere. But you've no time to turn, no need for advice. Either story's the same. Once we master the trick we never forget, then it's all kamikaze, sayonara, always, you tired old man, goodbye. On July 3rd, I inexplicably found myself turning into one of those tents and bought a huge bag of firecrackers and rockets and good shit. And haven't had any fireworks in 20 years. Went home. The dog wasn't interested. My wife wouldn't even come out. She looked out once, said, I want no part of this. Went right back in and watched more TV. And I thought to myself, here we are, a man alone, drunk, in the driveway, lighting explosives in the dark. This is a fine American moment. It deserves a poem, by God. And so this is it. And thank you very kindly for your attention. This is Dead Metaphor 21. These have graceful titles, don't they? Fireworks on the 4th. Your fast Hawk rocket via Hong Kong fizzles with a screech. The boomer Roman candle seems a few spectacular aerial balls short. China's happiness silver flowers calls little. Flying color butterflies barely get a wing up. But you've traded Coke bottle and plumbing tube for an empty from a nice domestic Syrah. Bic for matches from a posh brasserie. You're on your way, all right, as high and careening and toothless as fierce tiger soaring rocket, which clears roof by inches. Take that, John Bull. Franklin wouldn't touch the job. Adams demurred. You light one bamboo sparkler off another sparkler junkie, burn your signature into darkness. Your wife's initials, heart, scabbard, arrow. And no London gin tonight, thank you, sir. Rather, solid Yankee bourbon on ice. All around you, heaven rattles with poor men's insurgent popcorn against shackles of tyranny and taxation. Yeah. Your dog in the dim distance, shitting in indifference. Nevertheless, you ignite the 14-inch XXI missile, get away without spilling, and your wife, no patriot she, no tender of wounded and dying, she wouldn't even come out. Some misquote involving liberty or happy pursuits, followed by a self-evident truth or two. For $8 US, the XXI doesn't bring much bang to the end. Thanks.